Congratulations. You're fired. The words hung in the conference room like a fog no one dared breathe in. For a second, everything stopped. The boardroom sat frozen 12 members behind ceramic mugs and quarterly binders. I stood alone, not surprised, not even angry, just disappointed. My name is Rowan Mercer. I'm 54, and for the past 15 years, I've served as Chief Technology Officer at Hollowgate Systems, a company I co-founded with Trevor Williams in his Edmonton garage back in 2009. Trevor was sales. I was systems. He chased contracts. I built what made them possible. Now sir. Here we were, him firing me like a liability. I looked directly at him. Then I suggest you explain to the investors why everything goes offline in 9 minutes. Trevor blinked. His voice came brittle. Yours? I set my laptop and access badge gently on the table. Every 30 days, our infrastructure resets for security integrity. The restart requires biometric authorization from the registered CTO. I was still that person on paper and in the system. No transfer of credentials had been filed. No reassignment approved. Trevor had jumped the gun. Patricia Hayes, the system, the board chair, frowned. What happens if that authorization doesn't come? I checked my watch. Then the servers shut down, and they don't come back up. Trevor's face twisted. You're bluffing. I gave him the same calm look I'd used during cyber attacks and client escalations. I documented the protocol. You all approved it last quarter, though most of you didn't bother reading past the bullet points. I'd always been transparent, but Trevor never wanted to understand what he didn't control. Telling the truth, he never bought my patents, said full ownership was too expensive. So he licensed them network redundancies, auto failovers, authentication layers, all still legally mine. He thought that made him clever. What made him foolish was hiring Brandon Meyer. Brandon was 28, with 2 published machine learning frameworks and a line of recruiters from Amazon, Shopify, and Cisco knocking at his door. Trevor courted him like a golden ticket, claiming I was overworked and needed strategic support. In truth, Trevor was grooming his replacement. And now, without understanding the systems, without securing the legal CTO transition, he'd fired the only person holding the restart keys. 15 years of loyalty erased in 5 words. I adjusted my glasses, nodded once to no one in particular, and walked toward the elevator. Behind me, Trevor lurched toward Patricia, voice low and desperate. Through the glass, I saw her expression harden. Whatever he had planned, it was already unraveling. The elevator doors closed behind me, but the shouting didn't stop. Through the narrow gap before they sealed shut, I caught Trevor's voice loud, angry, cornered at Shikarwam. I leaned against the wall as the elevator descended, the silence inside far more deafening than the noise I'd left behind. 15 years of my life had just been signed off like an overdue invoice. But the moment Trevor fired me without legal CTO succession, he'd given away the last piece of leverage I still held. In the parking garage, I slid into the driver's seat of my old blue Tacoma, the same truck I'd parked in that same spot since our 2nd year of operation, the same spot Trevor tried to reassign to his nephew last fall, claiming executive realignment. I sat for a minute, engine off, watching the entrance ramp. Trevor always thought being louder made him smarter, but Patricia Hayes, chair of the board, was different. Patricia wasn't loud. She didn't waste energy. Former CEO of Nextwell Technologies. She'd taken over as Hollowgate's board chair 3 years ago after a private equity reshuffle. Strategic, composed, cold as Alberta frost. The kind of person who played 5 moves ahead and didn't blink when people got cut. She didn't like me. Or rather, she didn't trust people who didn't ask for permission. I wasn't a corporate man, I was a builder. Patricia preferred compliance to creativity, deliverables to loyalty. Trevor was her kind of person, easy to manipulate, hungry for recognition. He'd told her I was obsolete, too technical, too cautious, that Brandon Meyer was the future. Brandon, with his AI credentials and viral conference talks. Brandon, who was half my age and twice as polished. They were betting everything on him. But I'd watched Brandon flinch the first time a production bug hit live servers. I saw him buckle when he had to explain a failed deploy to a municipal client. He was brilliant but green, not ready, which meant one thing. They were gambling. The elevator dinged in the distance. I checked my watch 6 minutes until the automatic reset. Even now, I could imagine Brandon sprinting toward the server room, swiping his badge, praying the system would respond. It wouldn't. Imen. The biometric override required a specific retinal scan and voice confirmation mine. Not even Trevor had access. I'd offered to demo the protocol 3 times during board meetings. Trevor waved it off. Too technical. He'd said, let's move on. Now he'd learn what technical really meant. My phone buzzed. First one call, then another. To Renornan. Trevor, you did where want us. Brandon, Messer Bam Iletis. Patronan. Patricia. They'd realized too late. I put the truck in drive, pulling out slowly. Behind me, the Hollowgate building still stood tall, but inside, panic had already begun to rot its foundation. I built Hollowgate systems from scratch, line by line, bit by bit. But Trevor thought if he owned the walls, he owned the architect too. As I merged onto Crowchild Trail, traffic thickened, but my mind moved faster than any car on the road. Trevor wasn't stupid. That's what made this betrayal sting more than it should have. He had vision, he could sell, he knew how to read a room and how to charm a board. But somewhere along the line, he started believing his own pitch. He thought if he controlled the narrative, he could control the value. 3 months ago, I'd caught wind of what he was planning. At first, it was subtle requests to update documentation, questions about naming conventions in our infrastructure, then came the audit internal. Supposedly routine. Brandon led it, claiming it was to prepare for potential M&A conversations. Said we needed clean IP trails for the investors. I wasn't born yesterday. Behind the smooth talk and friendly PowerPoints, I saw the pattern. They were trying to backdate authorship, scrub contributor logs, and reposition system-level innovations as company property. The kicker. Trevor never bought the patents, never paid a cent for the original licenses. Years ago, when I designed the core protocol for municipal data routing, I'd filed it independently. My lawyer had warned me. If they won't buy it, register it or near forward, Trevor thought leaving it off the books meant it could be claimed later. He assumed silence was consent. What he didn't realize was that I'd quietly filed a full defensive portfolio, 12 patents, each tied to a timestamped feature deployed in our live systems. I didn't rub it in, didn't waive the documents at board meetings. I just waited to warn. He tried to corner me. Last week, he asked point blank about transferring access credentials. We need redundancy, he said. Too much risk if only one person holds the keys. I told him I'd consider it. Truth was, Trevor had been getting pressure from Patricia, from investors, maybe even from the audit committee. There were numbers in last quarter's report that didn't line up. Procurement overspending, vague consultant payments. If I stayed, someone might start asking questions I wasn't supposed to ask. He needed me out, cleanly, quietly. But there was a catch. No one else had my level of clearance. Transferring CTO credentials isn't like changing a password. It requires formal paperwork, audit filings, and a security window that can't be rushed. Trevor knew that, so he gambled. He figured he could fire me before I suspected anything, then have Brandon clean things up afterward, that I'd walk away. Pride bruised, but quiet. Maybe I'd take a sabbatical. Maybe I'd disappear. He thought I'd been asleep at the wheel. He was wrong. Brandon was ambitious. Yes, but he didn't have the experience or the architecture-level understanding to hold it all together. He was fast, eager, even charming in meetings, but beneath that polish, he was still green. Trevor had placed all his bets on a 26-year-old with a clean resume and no battle scars. And worse, he thought I hadn't noticed. But the part that stuck with me the most was what Trevor didn't do. He never offered to buy out the patents. Not once. Over the years, I'd filed invention disclosures for every major system upgrade. Every piece of original code. Trevor always skimmed past those reports, assuming anything I built while employed was automatically Hollowgate property. That was his blind spot. He wasn't stupid, just arrogant. He tried to weave my work into corporate assets behind closed doors. Had Brandon cataloging file trees and naming conventions, but that paperwork never made it to legal. He assumed possession was 9/10 of the law. That by the time anyone asked questions, I'd be gone, and the company would control the crown jewels. It was a bad assumption. I'd taken precautions, quiet ones, over coffee at my kitchen table. In late-night emails to my lawyer, I knew the day would come when I'd need proof not just of what I'd built, but of who owned it. By the time Trevor stood at that boardroom table with a pink slip and that rehearsed smirk, my paperwork was already in motion. And as he handed me my severance letter, I realized something. The man who thought he was 3 steps ahead had just walked into his own trap. I didn't flinch when I placed my security badge on the table, because the system was already counting down. As I crossed 10th Avenue, I glanced in the rearview mirror. From this distance, Hollowgate still looked impressive tinted glass. Stone façade were Terrawan at wine for enhancement. Subtle signage. No one outside would have guessed that inside, an executive team was running out of time. I turned onto a quieter street and parked near a bakery I used to stop at on Fridays. Not for the pastries too sweet, but for the smell. I rolled down the window and took out my laptop. Time to check. I connected through a private relay. The dashboard opened instantly, my failsafe interface. No logos. No labels. Just a blinking heartbeat on screen and a system message. Integrity protocol engaged. CTO authentication not detected. Lockdown countdown. 6 minutes, 48 seconds. I sipped cold coffee from a thermos and waited. They'd be scrambling now. Brandon, one assert, for all his textbook brilliance, had likely just discovered the CTO override file required biometric confirmation. He'd be talking fast, fingers flying, hoping the system logs could be bypassed. They couldn't. Patricia would be demanding answers. Legal would already be drafting contingency notes in case Veltry's CEO asked questions. And Trevor, he'd be flipping between fury and denial. He'd call it sabotage. He'd swear I planted it out of revenge. But he knew better. He knew I'd warned him months ago. I'd requested formal credential transition procedures. He dismissed them. Too much paperwork. We'll get to it, he said. Let's not get paranoid. And now, paranoia had a countdown clock. The real irony, Trevor had tried to trap me first. Weeks ago, he'd quietly asked Brandon to move key infrastructure into a new internal branch, naming him interim systems lead without telling the board. He hoped to shift control under Brandon's name, reroute logs, dilute my footprint, but he forgot one thing. The system was mine, end to end. I'd coded the reset protocol into the security daemon 2 years ago after an attempted ransomware breach. He thought I left, but I'd only gone silent. 4 minutes left. I watched as a new alert pinged the dashboard. Multiple failed override attempts. System had escalated to full encryption mode. The client files Veltry's prototype plans, investor pitch deck, usage data all frozen inside. And the best part, it wasn't sabotage. It was policy. Policy I'd proposed in a meeting 2 years ago. Monthly authorization checks. I'd called them protects our architecture. Trevor nodded, never reading the fine print. Now that fine print had teeth. I leaned back in the seat and looked at the bakery window. A kid pressed his face against the glass, pointing at chocolate croissants. I smiled, just barely. Not because I was proud, because it was working. Then the screen changed again. Final countdown, 60 seconds. And across town, someone at Hollowgate finally understood what irreversible really meant. The phone rang again. This time, I answered. Helen. I said before she even spoke. Her voice was clipped, but not panicked. It's bad. They're losing it. I could hear typing in the background, shuffling papers, someone shouting muted instructions. She must have stepped out of the main war room. Or whatever they were calling it now. Helen Lee, lead systems analyst, always running on buzzwords or I know one, and one of the few people who truly understood the architecture beneath Hollowgate's gleaming pitch decks. We'd worked side by side for years, through server migrations, security audits, and the awful 220 ransomware scare. Unlike Brandon, Helen didn't talk theory. She fixed things, quietly, precisely. They're locked out of everything, she continued. Files, client dashboards, internal comms. Even email. And the Veltry deck, it's gone. I didn't reply. I told Brandon to check the daemon logs. She added, lower this time. He didn't even know where they were stored. That sounded right. What are they saying about me? I asked. She hesitated. Trevor thinks you sabotaged the system? He's calling it malicious obstruction. Legal's trying to spin it as a rogue protocol. Patricia hasn't said a word. Of course not. Patricia never moved first. She let others show their hands. I looked across the street at a city bus pulling in. Passengers lined up. People going to work, finishing shifts. Circulationerwasen. Heading heading home. A normal day. But for Trevor, it was unraveling by the minute. Helen said, if this gets pinned on you, they'll try. I cut in. But they'd need to explain why they never reviewed the continuity logs. Why the CTO role wasn't transitioned properly. Why the patents were never transferred to the company. A long pause. You kept a font firm, filed and protected. I said, 5 years of core tech. All under my name. Licensed exclusively, but not owned. Helen whistled. You always were 10 moves ahead. Not always. I thought. For a long time, I'd believed in what we were building. I ate lunch at my desk, stayed late without being asked, defended our roadmap to angry investors, even when I disagreed with Trevor. I trained Brandon. I protected Trevor's public face. I let so many small things slide because I thought loyalty still meant something. And now, to one outer. I was on the outside, watching them flail, but not without a plan. Helen spoke again. What are you doing? I didn't answer right away. I'm watching them learn what it feels like when something they thought was theirs isn't. Her voice softened. Be careful. They'll come for you. I glanced at the countdown again. 0. System sealed. They already did. I said, then ended the call. The first call I took after the blackout wasn't from Trevor. It was from Marta Davies. She was calm and precise. Notices are in. Legal teams are scrambling. Veltry's confirmed they're ready to move on the contract. I said nothing for a moment. My eyes lingered on the frozen Hollowgate dashboard. Marta had drafted the agreement 2 weeks ago, but I'd asked her to hold it. I wanted to wait until they made their choice. Now they had. Trevor requested a meeting later that day. He brought Brandon with him. We met in a private meeting room. Blinds drawn, light filtered through smoked glass. The room reeked of expensive panic. Trevor slid a manila folder across the table. A consulting agreement. Modest fee. Nothing dramatic. Just to formalize a handover and prevent confusion. I opened it. A lowball figure. A full surrender of every system credential. Every code branch. Every technical asset. In exchange. Silence and erasure. I pushed it back. I'm not confused. Brandon leaned in. Rowan, this could help everyone save face. If the media gets the wrong idea, the media, I smiled thinly. You think this is about optics? Trevor stiffened. You're putting the company at risk. You're forcing our hand. I reached into my coat and pulled out an envelope. Not from Hollowgate. Pale blue. Clean. Embossed with Veltry's seal. I didn't force anything, I said. I just let your choices catch up to you. I placed the envelope on the table. As of this morning, I've signed with Veltry Dynamics. Officially. Trevor's eyes narrowed. They contacted you before this mess. They offered it to Mike and I said, 2 weeks ago, I didn't sign. Not until today. Not until I saw what you were really willing to do. Brandon blinked. You waited? I hoped you'd prove me wrong. Trevor said nothing. But the twitch in his cheek told me everything. This wasn't betrayal. It was consequence. And Dorn. I won't be transferring any proprietary access. I continued. The IP was never yours. You knew that. You gambled that I'd fold. And you sided with our biggest rival. Trevor snapped. No. I said. I sided with someone who valued the work. He stared at the folder. Silent, I stood, slipped the Veltry contract back into my coat, and left the room without shaking hands. By the time I pulled out of the cafe parking lot, the Hollowgate building stood 3 blocks behind me, just glass and steel now. No more weight. No more title. Just echoes. The system was still down. I'd checked the remote logs from my phone. The reset had completed. Access remained locked behind credentials only a legal CTO could provide, which, as of this morning, meant no one. Not Trevor, not Brandon, and certainly not Patricia. My phone buzzed as I reached the next light. Marta. Again, way too lira. It's official, she said. Veltry signed? Licensing confirmed 5-year exclusivity on all registered IP. Your patents are protected. And the payment cleared 15 minutes ago. Good. I said. And the statement, Going out in 1 hour, along with one from Patricia. That gave me pause. Because Marta had known for weeks what I only began to suspect recently, Patricia Hayes had never been loyal to Hollowgate's future. Only to her own. On paper, she was the board's stabilizer. A legacy executive, brought in to clean up after a failed merger 5 years ago. But underneath, she was a strategist with no mercy. She'd pushed Trevor to accelerate succession and remove me quietly. She'd greenlit the internal memo justifying my exit as structural. But none of it was about structure, it was about leverage. She'd known Trevor was bluffing, trying to cut me out without full ownership of the codebase. She saw him leaning on Brandon like a safety net, and she recognized the risk of letting me walk. But instead of stopping it, she let him fall. Privately, she started feeding information to Veltri. System dependencies, finance bottlenecks, confidential timelines. Not to destroy Hollowgate entirely, but to destabilize it long enough for the old guard to fall out and for her to rebuild on her terms. Veltri wasn't just a rival, it was a scalpel, and I had become the incision. Trevor didn't know he'd been maneuvered, that Patricia had ensured no one could reverse what just happened, that by betraying me, he handed her everything she needed to claim leadership failure and rally the board. And me, I never had to yell. I just waited for their hunger to devour itself. The dashboard, still offline. The servers, Tujerine, isolated in reboot mode. The clients, calling support lines that went nowhere. And the only person who could unlock it all had no reason to. As I merged onto the main road, Marta's final words stayed with me. Patricia didn't just bet on you. She bet against everyone else. I didn't smile. Not yet. But I finally understood why she hadn't tried to stop the fall she was planning the rebuild. 2 days later, I received a formal request to attend an urgent consultation with Hollowgate's executive team. It was framed politely. Of course, we'd had on one want, but I knew exactly what they wanted. We met in a private boardroom inside a boutique law firm, downtown Neutral Ground. White walls, uncomfortable leather chairs. Trevor was already seated when I walked in, face pale. Tomennes. Tisori loose. Brandon sat beside him, stiff and silent. Patricia stood by the window, her arms folded, unreadable as ever. I didn't sit. Let's not waste time. I began. You're here because your systems are still locked. Your clients are panicking. Your board is fragmenting. Trevor forced a breath. Rowan, we want to resolve this. Just tell us what you want. I slid a document across the table, Veltri's licensing terms. Hollowgate may continue using my patented systems, I said evenly. Under a 5-year non-exclusive license, the rate is 55% of gross logistics platform revenue. Paid quarterly. No backdoor clauses. No modifications allowed. Brandon blinked. That's extortion. No, I corrected him. That's market leverage. You had the option to own the patents. Trevor declined. Trevor's jaw clenched. You're holding us hostage. I shrugged. You're the one who fired your only key holder before securing access. That's not hostage. That's negligence. His hands trembled slightly. Then came Patricia's voice calm. Clipped, almost surgical. We should consider the offer under Hollowgate has no viable rebuild window. Clients have already paused contracts. Delays past next quarter will be fatal. Trevor turned to her. Stunned. You're siding with him. She met his gaze without blinking. I'm siding with continuity. Of course she was. That was the plan all along. Patricia didn't just want me gone. She wanted the control vacuum Trevor's arrogance would create. She let him walk into his own trap, knowing I'd never return under his leadership. And now, she could paint herself as the only rational stabilizer left. What would she gain? A new internal vote was coming, emergency leadership restructuring. With Hollowgate under licensing stress and Trevor's reputation in tatters, she'd emerge as the board's choice for interim CEO. And with that, she could renegotiate share structures, staff cuts, and outsource contracts with Veltri quietly backing her through me. That's the brilliance of it. I didn't orchestrate a hostile takeover. They walked into it one ego, one betrayal, and one ambition at a time. I'll give you 48 hours to respond, I said, turning to leave. Sorry, if Trevor stood, voice cracking. You'll kill us. I paused at the door. You did that the day you thought you could replace trust with paperwork. Behind me, no one spoke. The silence wasn't confusion, it was surrender. 3 weeks after the meeting, Hollowgate filed for creditor protection. The headlines came fast, then faster. Logistics tech giant halts operations. Hollowgate systems in blackout as clients flee. Board shakeup fails to stop investor exodus. The media didn't need my help. They had numbers, silence, and screenshots of error messages from angry customers across the country. One by one, the contracts dissolved. First were the retail giant's supply chain disruptions, automated dispatch failures, unrecoverable delays. Then the public sector clients pulled out, citing infrastructure reliability concerns. Within 10 days, over 70% of Hollowgate's recurring revenue vanished. The system remained technically available for rent, but Trevor refused. He held out, believing someone on the board would side with him. But after 2 emergency votes and 0 outside funding, his support crumbled. He was asked to step down for the good of the company. He refused. By then, it didn't matter. Brandon was let go the same week. His credentials looked good on paper, but talent on a spreadsheet doesn't substitute for lived experience. The board blamed him for failing to integrate core systems. He never had access to them in the first place. In his exit interview, he reportedly said, "I was never trained for this." He wasn't wrong. Patricia, however, didn't stay to witness the final collapse. She tendered her resignation just 1 day before the bankruptcy announcement. The statement read, "After much reflection, I've chosen to step back from Hollowgate and pursue new strategic ventures." By then, everyone in the industry had already seen the press release. Patricia Hayes was joining Veltri as executive chair of the strategic partnerships. She didn't just walk away from a burning building. She stepped into the command tower of the next one. I didn't attend the final shareholder meeting. Marta did. She said the mood was cold. Not angry, more like a ship's crew watching water rise past the second deck. As for me, I went for a walk that day. No press conferences. No victory speech. I just sat by the river in Prince's Island Park, watching geese break the ice as winter finally gave way. In my coat pocket, I held a photo from Hollowgate's first company retreat 10 years ago. We looked younger. We were younger. We believed in building something that would last. And maybe, in a way, we did. Just not for them. Sometimes, to rebuild with integrity. You have to let the house burn and remember who lit the match. Veltri didn't need a hero. They needed someone who knew the difference between control and stewardship. Someone who'd seen systems break and knew how to build ones that wouldn't. They gave me full authority over infrastructure, but with none of the silent suspicion that had followed me during my last months at Hollowgate. No hidden memos. No vice presidents of strategy watching from the corner of the room. Just a seat at the table and a voice that mattered. On my second week, the CEO invited me to a private lunch. "We don't just want your code, Chameri," she said. "We want the way you think." That mattered more than any title. The licensing deal brought in more than I'd expected. Between the royalties, the sign-on bonus, and the equity package, I had what I needed and more than enough for her. Mara had always dreamed of opening a small gallery space, something intimate, part studio, part cafe, part classroom for young artists. For years, she put that dream aside while I worked late, traveled, missed anniversaries and birthdays. Now, it was her turn. She didn't ask. I offered. No fanfare. Just a handwritten card and a copy of the lease, slid across the kitchen table with our morning coffee. She didn't cry. She just held my hand a little longer than usual. That was enough. We never spoke about Hollowgate again. Not in detail. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't matter anymore. Some people think revenge is about destruction, burning bridges, bankrupting enemies, broadcasting their collapse to the world. But real justice, sometimes it looks like a quiet walk into a better room. When you built yourself, one they can never enter. I didn't win by striking back. I won by staying standing, by knowing what was mine, and letting time reveal what was never theirs. The world kept spinning. New startups rose, others fell, but at Veltri, we built things that worked and lasted. One evening, months later, I found myself back in Prince's Island Park. Same bench. Same river. Different season. Surikamon. The trees had bloomed again. The geese had returned. In my pocket, I no longer carried that old photo from Hollowgate. I left it in a drawer next to the termination letter they once thought would silence me. I never needed to raise my voice. I just needed to wait long enough for the truth to echo louder than the lie. They replaced me, lied to my face, took what I built, and I walked away in silence. Not because I gave up, but because I had something better. A plan, Sornin Sornason. This isn't just my story. It's one of many office stories where people are pushed aside not for failing, but for standing too tall, where experience is mistaken for resistance, and loyalty is treated like a threat. Maybe you're living through one right now. Maybe you've poured years into a job, only to be overlooked the moment someone cheaper or shinier walks in. Maybe you're the one who quietly keeps everything running, while someone else takes the credit. To you, I say this: don't break. Don't panic. Think. Prepare. My victory didn't come from rage. It came from seeing the game and playing it better. Here's what I learned. First, strategy always beats emotion. When you're betrayed, it's natural to react. But anger clouds judgment. I didn't retaliate, I observed, planned, knew of the future and executed when the timing was right. My calm was not weakness. It was precision. Second, one. Silence isn't surrender, it's power. In office stories, silence often speaks louder than shouting. I didn't make a scene. I simply walked away. I knew what they didn't, that the system would reset, that only I had the real access. Because they rushed. Because they assumed I'd panic. They were wrong. Third, always keep receipts. Documentation saves you. Every contract, email, signature, version history file it. Trust is fine. Proof is better. When the power shifts, the facts will speak louder than memories. Fourth, months. Ownership changes everything. If you invent something valuable, enough. Protect it, know your rights, understand intellectual property laws. Just because a company uses your work doesn't mean they own it. Many will try to blur the lines. Draw them clearly and never lose sight of where the value truly lies. Free, sermonons. Patience pays off when paired with preparation. Success doesn't come to those who wait. It comes to those who plan while waiting. I studied the contracts. I built alliances. I had a new role lined up before they even pulled the trigger. By the time they figured it out, the window had already closed. Office stories like mine don't end with drama. They end with consequences, board resignations, silent exits, partnerships dissolved, sometimes one and one. The most powerful statement is the one made without saying a word. If you're still watching, maybe you saw a part of yourself in this. If you've ever been sidelined, betrayed, or belittled, hear this. Your worth is not defined by those who failed to recognize it. Ask yourself, are you living your own office story? If yes, leave a 1 in the comments to let others know they're not alone. Share this video with someone who might need it. And if you have a story of your own, feel free to tell it. It could help someone else hold on a little longer. Because office stories aren't just about injustice. They're about the quiet strength that rises in the face of it. They're about dignity, patience, intelligence, and the will to rise again. Let me leave you with this thought. Sometimes, the strongest voice in the room is the one that speaks last. Thank you for your time. Thank you for believing that fairness still matters. And thank you for standing tall in a world that often rewards shortcuts. May your next move be guided not by bitterness, but by wisdom, and may your office story end with your head held high and your values intact. God bless you, God bless your journey, and God bless every quiet fighter still waiting for their moment.